Mula Sanganiwan, mga kababayan, ako napakagandang topic natin ngayon. Madam Clarita Carlos ng National Security Advisor nagbigay ng malalim na dahilan tungkol po sa parliamentary at federalism. Pakinggan po natin mga kababayan kung paano pinangaralan ang isang senador na number 1 po noong nakarang eleksyon. Pakinggan po natin mga kababayan.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, Senator Padilla. Just to repeat, if the senator had not invited me, I would have volunteered to come. Mainly because many years ago, starting in 1989, I was already part of a group composed of your father, very good friend, Nene Pimentel, Pepe Abueva, our UP president, and several others who went around the whole archipelago doing political education. Why did I say it was political education? Because we were not really like advocating federal and parliamentary system. We were really laying down the groundwork for a future referendum when the population would be asked in regard to constitutional changes. And so whenever we have these interactions, I would always be the curtain raiser, the first one to introduce the subject area on federalism and parliamentary systems. So what you really need to realize is that a democracy can only work because you have informed citizenry. After all the government authorities come from the people, and I think that is enshrined in our Constitution. So anything that the people grants to the government, it can also take away. That is the reason why you have recall, you have impeachment, and the like. So that even if you had been elected by X number of votes, there are also mechanisms by which you may be not elected anymore. And that brings us to the question of why are we revising our Constitution? Well, the quick and dirty answer there, I use the term quick and dirty because it's the one we use as social scientist, Senator, to mean that we had very little time and therefore I have to truncate my responses. I know I can deliver a whole session here of my lecture, but I know that there are many other resource persons. And I hope you will invite me another time so we can continue this conversation on many aspects of the changes that you want undertaken. Structures are very important. Structures are really the institutions within which you envelope or you embrace individuals and groups, and the structures will define the limits to action. They will define the floor and they will define the ceiling, the bottom and the top. So that an individual, when given a particular structure, like if this were a glass, the individual knows that it can only work within the structure of the glass. Like this, cylinder. Like, you talk of the leche flan, which can be formed in different configuration. If you form it in an oblong, the milk and the sugar will only work along the edges of the oblong or whatever shape the leche flan will take. That is the nature of structure. Now, if you put warm bodies in structure, then the warm bodies will have to align within the structure. And when they so align within the structure, you invariably change their behavior. So the basic groundwork, Senator, of the changes that you want would really be this philosophical perspective that structures will result in behavior change. That's the reason why we're revising the Constitution. Because what you have seen from 1987 is that there have been a lot of things that we have done and not done, and we think that a change is in order. And the change can only come from changing the relationship among structures. And I think you hit on one of the major relationship, and that is between the executive and the legislature. Now people seem to get confused in regard to federal and parliamentary systems. I think you mentioned that already, Senator Pimentel. When you talk of federal systems, you really talk of the relationship between the national government and the subnational units. So when you talk of a parliamentary system, you're talking about the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Okay, what is the difference between a presidential system and a parliamentary system? Siguro, konting kasaysayan. Nag-umpisa ang parliamentary system sa tinatawag na Mother of Parliament, Great Britain. Nagkaroon sila ng bloodless revolution in 1688, where once upon a time, it was the king who declared the law. And I'm sure you remember the divine rights of kings, Senator Robin. The divine rights of kings simply declares that the kings represent God, and therefore, whatever the king says is law. But they had this glorious revolution, and so they constituted what is called the parliament. The word parliament comes from the French term parler, P-A-R-L-E-R, which means to talk. That's why parliament is a talking environment. You talk. If you zipper your mouth there, I mean, you'll be ousted in the next election, because that's why no bobo can be member of parliament, by the way. I'm sorry for the use of the word, but I cannot find any other one which is appropriate, meaning somebody who has nothing between his ears will eventually be kicked out of the parliament because he will not be able to converse, he will not be able to exchange views, he will not be able to sustain the question hour, which will happen. I think you mentioned that a while back, because in the question hour, every member of the parliament will be asked, what have you done in agriculture, what have you done in health services, and the like, and will be made accountable for what he has or has not done. So, you know, the beauty of this is just starting to unravel, and I wish this would be a continuing conversation, Senator, so that, you know, this will require many, many sessions, I assure you, because I'm just truncating my thoughts now. I'm putting them all together, and then maybe later on I will spell them out in more detail, if not in this session, in some other sessions. All right. What is the other outstanding quality of a parliamentary system? The fundamental principle is parliament is supreme, which means whatever the parliament declares is law. Of course, if you have a dual executive, then the executive, who is a ceremonial executive, will give his or her imprimatur, but that is only pro forma. You recall Queen Elizabeth? Queen Elizabeth will dare not give the royal assent. It is given as a matter of course, because it has been taken away from the royals. They are just there for, oh, I don't know, maybe for decoration, you know, and to for us to gossip about, no, and find out what dresses they're wearing. But if in a parliamentary system, you will have two executives, the one who will be there when your prime minister is kicked out of office and when the government of the day is not there, and therefore you have a president there who will be the bridge towards the next government of the day. I will expand on this later because I have limited time. But yes, parliament is supreme. Whatever the parliament declares today, the next parliament can repeal. That is how powerful the parliament is. That is the essence, that is the vortex of the principle of parliament is supreme. So, any law can be repealed at a later time. Do you recall Great Britain getting out of the European Union? That was a decision of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party went to the people and said, if you elect the Conservative Party members, we are going to get Britain out of the EU. And the people voted the Conservative Party members. Did they vote for Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister at the time, or Boris Johnson as Premier? No, they voted for these two people as members of Parliament. It only happened that both Theresa May and Boris Johnson were leaders of their political party. And when they constituted the majority in the Parliament, the leader became the Premier. That goes for every other parliamentary system. Whoever is the head of the majority party or a coalition of political parties becomes the Premier. And the Premier is the head of government. The President is the chief of state. All right. The other pluses of parliamentary system, and has been noted by Senator Padilla, is that there is a fusion of the executive and the legislature. You are not electing an executive because the Prime Minister will elect from among the majority party members the heads of his cabinet. If you'll notice, if you've been to Great Britain, or if you have seen it, as they are being videoed, you'll notice that the configuration is something like this, although the walkway is a little bit bigger, maybe double this. That's the reason why there is a term called crossing the aisle, isn't it? Because that is the aisle. If you cross the aisle, you actually change your political color. So, let us assume the speaker is there. Whoever is seated to the right of the speaker is the government of the day. You are the premier. I am the shadow government. I am the head of the minority party. At any time you are ousted, we will exchange places. And let us say Senator Pimentel is seated there as the head of housing. Opposite from him would be Professor Monsod, who will be the housing minister even when your government is ousted. Do you see, even just looking at the parliament in a process, you already have a story there, isn't it? A lot of stories there. The concept of rightists and leftists came from that. Whoever is in the right of the speaker wants to keep the status quo. You want to be the government of the day. The one who is on the left of the speaker wants to change the status quo. We are the shadow government. I want to change you. I want to be the next premier. So, all right. What is the other beautiful part about parliamentary system? There will be no notion of term limits. If you are elected as a member of parliament, you can be elected for as long as you are alive or can continue to discourse in parliament. And you are elected by your electoral district, by the way. If you do not perform, of course, the next time you are not elected. And the best part about that is you don't even need to spend for your election, because it is the political party to which you will plug your umbilical cord, because it will pay for your campaign expenses, your radio and TV time. But beware, if Eric here is a member of the political party, I'll tell him, Eric, bayaran ko yung campaign expenses mo, and radio and TV time mo. Pero kung ka, whenever you are in parliament, you've got to toe the party line. Which means, if we are, let us say, against abortion, dapat against abortion tayo. Yan ang party line. Kung hindi, tumiwalag ka sa party. You see, party discipline. Kasi hawak ko na siya, ako nagasto sa kanya. Okay. And the other better part of this election is that we're not going through a very tortuous, ano ba yun? Parang 3 months na election na naubos na yung salapi mo, hindi pa matapos yung campaign. The usual campaign period is only 2 weeks. After the parliament is dissolved, within 10 to 12 days, meron ka ng bagong parliament. Because you only go to the electoral district and you campaign on the electoral district. You are not campaigning in the whole Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You are campaigning only in your electoral district. So you don't need 3 months to do that. No term limits. There will be no, even political dynasties will be irrelevant. Why? Your political dynasties, and the empirical evidence supports me here. Orion, are you there? I'm sure you can say more about that later. But the reason why you have political dynasties is because you have term limits. You told people that ikaw ganitong taon ka lang pwedeng elect. Sabihin, naku, ganda sana ng gagawin ko. Itong kapatid ko si Eric, siya na nga ang aking sunod na mag-elect, no? Mag-campaign. At marami na akong naitanim na mga magagandang mga proyekto. Siyempre, Eric is more likely to be elected. Not so much because we have the same surname, Carlos, but because he just followed through what I earlier started. Why will there be no political dynasties? Which is so antithetical, by the way, to democracy. Because you can only be elected by the electoral district. Never mind that your surname is the same as mine. Do you see? These are really the things that we have to think about. And I think if we're talking about strategic communication, Senator Padilla, this is how we should sell it. No term limits, no political dynasties. These are irrelevant issues in a parliamentary system. Okay, well, I don't know how much more I can go deeply on this, but do I have the time?
Opo.
Okay, all right. What else does a parliamentary system require? It needs a very, very strong bureaucracy. That is the reason why in parliamentary systems you have what is called permanent secretaries, because it's not the case here where when you have a change of administration, you change everybody up to director. Do you know, I wrote a book, by the way, Senator Padilla, on bureaucratic reform. I'll give you copies, no? Sorry sa commercial, ha? Pero doon, nakita ko ang presidente will appoint upwards of 5,000 positions. I'm sure, Senator Pimentel Padilla, you know that mag-choose nga lang tayo ng 10, nahihirapan tayo. Isipin mo, 5,000 yung papakailaman mo. Every time there is a change in administration. And that's now it's not going to be. In a parliamentary system, only the head of the department, only the head of the ministry will change. And there will be continuing policy because the permanent secretaries will be the ones that will continue the policy, and it's only the direction that the head of the ministry that will direct. Do you see the beauty of all this? The bureaucracy is king in a parliamentary system. That's why when you talk about implementation, never mind that the cabinet secretaries are changing, it's really the bureaucracy under them who will continue under the continuing rules of the game, or the rules of, well, the rules of the civil service, or the rules of the bureaucracy. So, when we adopt the parliamentary system, all these concomitants we really have to put in together. You cannot adopt them like fragmented, like with all due respect, you cannot revise the Constitution piece by piece or fragmented. Let's talk of the Constitution like an organism, like a human body. Meron siyang sakit sa kanyang puso, may sakit siya sa kanyang kidney. Wag lang yun ang pakialaman mo. Pakialaman mo lahat kasi infirm siya eh. Kasi yung puso niya at saka yung kidney niya, meron siyang relationship, di ba? So hindi mo pwedeng galawin yung economic provisions kasi yung economic provisions, nakatukod siya sa political and social provisions. Hindi ba? So hindi siya pwedeng stand alone. Papalitan mo yung economic. Tapos yung iba hindi mo siya papakialaman. When we are going to revise the Constitution, dapat omnibus ang revision mo. Kasi bawat section doon na papalitan mo, ay meron siya mga pinsan sa other sections. Mag-move lahat siya eh. They will all be moving parts. So, I'm sorry, I apologize if I go against the notion that you can in fact revise the Constitution piecemeal. You can't. Otherwise, we will be wasting our time, and some other time we will again revise the Constitution, and we don't like to do that. You know, revising the Constitution is not like suddenly, you know, we scratch our head and let's revise the Constitution. Sa ligang batas po natin yan. It's the basic law of the land. It is not revised willy-nilly. It's not as if, you know, ganito yung capriccio natin ngayon, we change it. No, we don't. We're changing it because we want a structural change. We want a structural change because we want behavior change. I think I shall conclude at that point.